Turns out awkward if we try to calculate live. All right. You boys ready? And I'll point at you, Jay, when to start.
I just swallowed the coffee wrong. Yes, I'm ready.
Well, I'm glad that happened before the show started, at least. All right. Starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the RPG After Years, your weekly show covering all things RPGs from the past, present, and the future. I'm Jay.
And I'm Scott.
And with us today is our bonus fifth ninja host.
It's Corey.
My lisp came out there. This is episode 28. Today we are finishing our review of the 2018 PS4 mega hit God of War. Now, since it's a review, we won't be doing any catch-up or news or anything like that. Today, we are going to be covering the gameplay as well as the final ratings for God of War. But before all of that, let's talk a little bit about the save state of the podcast. So, as everybody knows, the RPG After Years has a pretty on-fleek Patreon that's totally available to anybody who wants to give us money. So, Corey, who is an actual patron, thank you for your patronage.
Always.
Why don't you tell us and all the listeners what that Patreon's all about?
So, guys, here's some of the things I get because I decide to throw money at these guys for one reason or another. I get early episode access, so I can listen to the episode before anybody else. It's usually 2, sometimes 3 days early. I don't have to listen to the guys spiel about Anchor during the show at all, so I don't have to worry about skipping ahead. I get ad-free episodes. I get the aftercast where the guys pretty much just choose a topic and then shoot the shit about it. They're a little more, let's say, relaxed on those topics. There's extra reviews where you can actually listen to me and Scott talk about a whole bunch of Nintendo games, and basically just any game that we finish, you're going to get an extra review from us.
Not always just me and you.
Not always, but
mostly
a lot of them.
There's one with Rich on there, I think.
Oh, one.
Me and Rich don't actually finish games, so it's kind of hard for us to be on bonus reviews if we don't finish anything.
That is known. And the newest part is the RPG club that the guys have started. You not only get to vote, you also get to put in a nomination for it, and plenty more. So go check them out. It's at patreon.com/RPG After Years.
That was a Xenoblade reference there. And Jay's actually going to be on one bonus review soon for Last of Us here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, such a good game. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so we've also started a Twitch, and we're actually streaming this episode live to the Twitch stream right now. So that's twitch.tv/RPG After Years. I'm really having like a tongue-tied issue today. Like I feel like the spirit of Mike Tyson's like taking over me.
You didn't do your vocal warm-ups before the show.
I did not. I forgot the warm tea, the peppermint tea, and I'm totally messed up. But yeah, we are also going to try and at some point to fit in a streaming schedule. I streamed one time and then got ahead of myself and a little bit too busy to actually get to streaming this past week. But it is on the agenda.
I was wondering about that because you said you were going to stream a couple of times this week, and then I didn't remember actually seeing you go live.
Yeah. So the problem is that I end up wasting all my energy and then probably about 8-9 o'clock whenever Gracie's in bed and I can like actually stream without a bunch of distractions or noise. I'm like dead tired, and so I just go and do whatever I was going to do in bed instead of at my desk, and I'm not going to stream while I'm sitting in bed.
Makes sense. You were just telling me this morning how you're never sleeping past like 8.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
womp womp. And we kicked off our RPG club last week, and so now we should be in.
Or at the time of this release, how many weeks ago was it?
I guess it would have been the week before this episode came out. Spoiler alert: this is a pre-recorded review.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
But so we all got to the Sand River. We all talked about that. That was great.
Yes,
so
great episode that was.
one of my favorites. And if you guys aren't already still playing Wild Arms, make sure to get on that. You have 1 week left. You have until August 23rd to get to the Sacred Shrine. Again, the next RPG club will meet on August 23rd. So yeah, you better get on that. And if you don't know, the RPG club is basically just a book club where we all play the same game in small chunks to where we're all playing the general same section of the game at the same time. And it's just sort of like a cool community type thing. I think it's been really fun and successful so far. Just that first week was very stressful time-wise.
Yeah, I think we had quite a few people participating. I did not really, so I thought it was every week for some reason. We had to get to a section like every week, and so I was freaking out. I was like, oh my god, like what, 6 hours every week? Why did we agree to this? And then Colin was like, no, doofus, it's every 2 weeks. This is your show.
I just fucked us over with that first week with the abbreviated time schedule.
Yeah. Do I math?
I didn't even do it on purpose, but it was too late by the time I realized.
But it was too late. Cool. With all of that out of the way, we're going to take a quick break and then move on to the remaining sections of the review. All right, so let's move on to part 2. So in part 1, which would have been released 2 weeks ago, whenever this episode is out, we talked about the story, how awesome it was, how amazing we all thought it was, how beautiful it was, the history, the amazing lore within these awesome games. What am I talking about? Gameplay. Yeah, let's talk about gameplay.
There we go.
That was very smooth, Jay.
The story is just so much good.
There was a lot there.
Yeah. So as a general synopsis of how this game plays, so God of War is an action adventure game, I think, technically speaking. But I think there's a fuzzy line between action adventure and RPG. Like, I would say God of War is totally an RPG. You're role playing as Kratos. Come on. Grand Theft Auto, you're totally role playing as the dude who's shooting hookers.
It barely made it over the line to where I would include this in the main show.
Yeah, it's also so lore and fantasy heavy. I really pushed for this to be a main episode, especially since it's I would say if you like RPGs, then you're probably gonna like this game. But
or at least if you like action RPGs.
Yes, it is a third person over the shoulder game. So if you want to, I don't know, compare it to a JRPG, it would be more like Final Fantasy 15 in terms of the actual gameplay. But it is like pseudo open world, so the majority of the game is on rails, but it's on rails within the respect of, hey, this is pretty open. There's like 0 loading screens, like we talked about in the previous review episode. And then the
third person over the shoulder thing, that's like a departure for the series, right?
Yeah. So in the original series, it was kind of almost like overhead. Like you had it wasn't over the shoulder. It was third person, but it was like very helicopter-y.
Mm-hmm. I remember when we were reading about the history, we talked about how the camera was pulled so close to Kratos that they had to they basically removed most platforming aspects.
Yeah, the original God of War games were very platform heavy. Like they were all puzzles, hack and slash. It was basically do some puzzles, a crap load of hack and slash, watch a cutscene, fight a boss, repeat. Like that was kind of the formula.
Right.
But this time it was very much definitely adventure-y. I feel like the over the shoulder third person aspect drove kind of how I don't know how smooth everything might have been, especially with the puzzles. Like getting a little ahead of myself, but the I feel like the puzzles in this game are like probably where I prefer them in terms of games. Like I hate hard stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the puzzles.
Yeah, and then
there's also the axe, which you a lot of times you have to throw. So that was like another thing that the over the shoulder vantage point lends itself to.
yeah, totally. So in terms of combat, it is a combo based combat. So it is still kind of somewhat hack and slash in those terms, but it's not. I want to say it's not nearly as hack and slash as the old God of War games are, because I still feel like you have to like strategically use combos in this game.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, what is it like? Light attacks, heavy attacks, and then you have like specific. I think the triggers do something specific with your, depending on which weapon you have equipped.
Yeah.
It also depends on the rune that you attach to each weapon, because you attach the rune, and one rune is hit L1 and circle at the same time to do this, or hit both triggers to do this. You can pretty much customize it the way you want it.
Yeah, it is really cool. And so weapon wise, God of War is kind of known for Kratos being able to have a bunch of different types of weapons. And every other single God of War, it's like you start out with the Blades of Chaos, and then you progressively get more weapons that either help you fight specific type of creatures or just help you progress through the game. So in this game, you start off with the Leviathan axe, which is a pretty sweet axe. I think wasn't the lore behind it that it belonged to what's her face?
Freya?
Faye?
Yeah.
Oh
Faye.
yeah, that's right. The dwarves made it for her, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you have runes, and I don't remember a whole lot about the runes, unfortunately, but like Corey just explained it a little bit. Then you have the Guardian Shield. You also have hand-to-hand combat, and then you get the Blades of Chaos maybe a little over halfway through the game.
Yeah.
So
just in general, how do you feel about the basic combat?
I feel really good about it. I personally think the basic combat is miles better than the original God of War games. And I also think it's better than probably any JRPG that's come out that's tried to emulate action adventure. I'd say it's better than the Final Fantasy VII remake, to be completely honest.
Interesting.
Maybe not by a large margin. I think they're pretty on par, but I definitely enjoyed the God of War gameplay.
Did either one of you guys feel like ever overwhelmed? Because it seemed like watching the game, they packed a whole bunch into the combat, and so many different combos and moves and runes and weapons. Did it ever feel overwhelming?
Absolutely. Thanks for that transition, Corey.
You're welcome.
I don't remember being overwhelmed. I remember everything feeling pretty smooth.
I think part of it is I did enjoy the combat, but I am not good at it at all. I always felt like I had a hard time remembering which buttons did what besides like your basic heavy and light attacks. Because if you go into like the skill tree, which we'll get to, and like look at all your different moves, it's like press R1, then R2 while running, and then stop, pause a second, and press R1 again. And it almost felt like I was trying to memorize like sometimes like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat combos to get.
I was going to say it felt like Mortal Kombat.
Like the stance switching, I was like, I know that all you have to do is pause for a second in your attack, but it's like my mind was just like I stopped pushing buttons and then push. It's like I don't know. It's just it is fun, but I didn't love it.
What difficulty did you guys play on?
Normal.
Normal. Yeah, so did I on my first gameplay playthrough, and I only died one time, by the way.
Really?
Wow.
We died, or I died a bunch.
I think
A lot.
I think maybe it was probably the dragon boss fight. I think is when I probably died. But yeah, I for some reason, and maybe it's just because of all my experience with the previous God of War games, because I used to smash through those games like I'd play through all the difficulties on the old God of War games.
It's because of your all your Nordic axe throwing competitions you've
Yes.
participated in.
Yes, all one of them.
Did you ever so if you don't have your axe, you can do hand-to-hand combat. Not sure if we mentioned that yet. Did you ever like throw away your axe in favor of doing more of the hand-to-hand stuff?
I feel like not. I don't really think so. I think maybe I did it like strategically. But
Yeah.
outside of that, no, I didn't. I didn't use hand to hand combat a whole
I
lot.
only remember ever doing it when I on accident, like I forgot I didn't have my axe or something, and I would just start wailing.
Yeah,
I think it might have been good for like, or more able to like stun enemies or kind of knock them off balance more, because you
Mhm.
sort of like slam them with your shield and stuff when you're doing that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was good to have the option.
Yeah. I think it's more strategic. I don't think it's actually a good weapon, but
Was that a thing in the past God of Wars? Like you can just use your bare fists if you choose.
I don't. I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure you just used a specific button to like toggle through your actual weapons. I know during cutscenes, like interactive cutscenes, Kratos was all about like bashing people's face in with his fist. But through the actual game, like heavy attack, light attack, I think it was all weapons.
Yeah, there used to be because I think I did read that the fist thing was like a brand new thing, and I wonder if that's another thing that they added because of the camera shift.
Yeah, I think it was. I personally think it was really smooth and like neat to look at. Like, oh, I'm Kratos and I'm punching these people in the face. That's like everybody who grew up in the mid 2000s was like, that's what I want to do, is be
Right.
Kratos and punch people in the face. One aspect we didn't mention with the Leviathan axe is that whenever you throw it, it comes back to you.
Yes,
I think
like a
that's
boomerang, almost like
yeah,
Thor's Mjolnir in the
yeah.
MCU movies.
I
And
think
that's also
it's part of a lot of the puzzles. So especially in some of the really cold areas, like lots of doors stuff and gates are like frozen. So you have to use the axe to throw it, break the ice, and then it comes back to you. Or like you use it to stick into something to like to keep it from, I don't know, turning, and then you walk past whatever was blocked by the gear, and then
yeah.
you press the button to bring the axe back to you.
Well, the axe is infused with like ice magic or something. So whenever it hits like a switch or whatever, it'll freeze it in
Oh yeah,
place.
that's right. I had that backwards. It freezes stuff. It doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And that lends itself to the puzzle thing. But I really liked the throwing the axe aspect, just because it allowed me to stay away from enemies. So for some of the harder enemies, like you can get to points where you're fighting enemies way harder than the level that Kratos is currently at, kind of, and that's indicated by like the color of their health bar. So there would be a few times of like a purple health bar enemy, which means they're like way higher than you, that I would just, stay 10 feet away and just throw the axe at them over and over and over. The battle may have taken like 12 minutes, but I did eventually win.
I actually
The
think that was like your first death, is you got into a fight with a purple health bar enemy, and you like we didn't realize at the time health bar colors determines the level of the enemy, and you thought you just melee him with your axe, and he meleeed your ass.
that's funny.
And you can also like leave the axe behind if you want to. Like he just put it somewhere and then go 2 miles away and then call it back, and it might take us a few seconds, but you never really lose it.
Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the coolest things. Um, so there were several times where I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna play around. I'm going to throw the axe here, and I'm just going to keep walking and see what happens. And then you press the button to return it, and he just sits there and waits for it for like several seconds, and then it comes back to him. I thought
I
that was
definitely left
really
it
neat.
behind without intending to a few times, and then when I finally called it back, I was like, "Is it coming?"
It is a really cool strategy to throw the Leviathan axe at an enemy who's really far away if you're surrounded, and then like ground and pound with your fists, and then call it back whenever you are in a safe transition to actually sit there and wait for it to come back.
And if you stick it in an enemy, it does a little bit of damage when you call it back and like pull out damage. That's what she said. And it'll also hit enemies on the way back, like Jay just said. So a lot of times if it does that, you end up doing like double damage if you sort of plan it right.
Yeah, so really cool strategy is to throw it at somebody who's far away, pound them with your pound the ones around you with your fist, and when they're all like in a group and you're far enough away to not get like gang banged, call it back and it slashes them all.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then as far as the runes or magic, you do get like some elemental spells. Like I know with the axe, there's one where he sort of like cuts at the ground, and then there's like a shock wave of ice that just like blasts out like a shotgun blast kind of. But you also get summons with Atreus, where you can call in like an electric wolf or like a ice deer, things like that. I had even though it was very useful, I would forget to use it a lot.
I would have to tell you, but like use Atreus.
Yeah, Corey like was literally like reminding me what my moves were while I was playing.
You can also kind of control Atreus to get attentions of large enemies. You know what? I did die more than one time, but only in one other area. That huge troll thing towards the beginning of the game. What
the
was
first
it?
time?
Yeah.
Because you fight like those giant trolls like 12 times or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
You have to have a pretty good strategy with Atreus, or otherwise you just get destroyed. But Atreus, you can call Atreus in, and he'll like shoot things with his arrow and get attention, and then he'll get smacked or something like that and still survive. So yeah, I remember doing that battle, and I think I tried to do it on hard at some point, play the game on hard, and I just couldn't get past that point. Maybe it was an ogre, I don't know. But
you press square at any time to have Atreus shoot the arrows, which is pretty cool. And towards the end of the game, after you've upgraded him some, his arrows actually do like a respectable amount of damage.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that you can call him to distract, and then he can just get like destroyed, and then you're just like, okay, thanks, kid.
Our Atreus got smacked multiple times because we put the armor on where he'll jump on an enemy's back and try to like choke him out with his bow. And while he's doing that, if you hit that enemy, it deals higher rates of damage. So he'd always jump on our enemies' backs, and then they'd turn around and look at him and just swat him away. So poor guy got abused on our end.
Do you remember that meme from Kingdom Hearts 2, Jay, where it's like when you're fighting the Hydra in the Hercules world, and Phil just yells, "Get up on the Hydra's back!" like over and over and over during that fight.
Get up on the Hydra's back. Get up on the Hydra's back.
That's what that reminded me of whenever you climb up the trolls.
So I hate that scene. I hate that battle in Kingdom Hearts 2.
Yeah. So you also get the. Well, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So you also get the Blades of Chaos about halfway through the game, and I would say it's pretty akin to the old God of War games. The majority of the combos I think were the same. So I think, I don't know, it was kind of like a really cool blast of nostalgia. It was like, oh man, this feels like old school Kratos. I feel like these combos bring me back.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting to get these, so when it did get them, it was a nice surprise. And I think this was sort of like a turning point for me in the game, even though it was so late comparatively because I'd already done most of the side quests. I finally felt like I just kind of could whoop most enemies' asses, because at this point you don't really have to plan out the strategy so much with them. You can just like, tap the shoulder buttons, and Kratos does all kinds of spinny combos without you necessarily even trying to.
Yeah, and that's
you can get
that's
up
God of War
faces.
1 through 3.
Right. you had to be careful because it kind of required you to, if you weren't being quite strategic with it, you're right up in the enemy's faces, and you can take damage quite quickly if you're not paying attention.
Yep. So on top of the Blades of Chaos, you still have Spartan Rage, which I don't remember a whole lot about using the Spartan Rage whenever I did my gameplay.
I very rarely used it too, even though there was like a whole meter dedicated to it. There's the red bar below your health bar. When that was full, or actually, I think you could activate Spartan Rage at any time as long as you had some of that. That just determined how long it lasted. But I think I only used that less than 5 or so times the whole game. Yeah, basically, Kratos just goes Hulk mode, and you can just sort of, beat the shit out of everybody with your fists.
Yeah. Yeah, I just liked using the weapons and strategically moving. I didn't really like the brute force method.
Isn't there one part where the game forces you into rage mode? I think it's
when isn't it a fight with Baldur?
That might be it. I think I remember another time in Offheim.
Baldur was like the main guy that you always fought fist to fist.
Right. Yeah. There was another time in Offheim when you get temporarily separated from Atreus for some reason, and all the dark elves are swooping in on him. It's like in that temple that sinks into the ground, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess the summon things that I was talking about, that's more of an Atreus thing, one of his abilities, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you own Atreus. So.
Boy.
You are Atreus.
I feel like Atreus most days whenever I think about my childhood. So. Yeah, you also get fast travel, and I do not remember even ever using fast travel, to be completely honest.
So for 90+% of the game, when you use fast travel, the only way you can do it, there's designated gates scattered all across the world, but they only take you back to Tyr's temple at the center of the Lake of Nine. And if you'll remember, when you use those gates, you sort of walk through the world tree, Yggdrasil. And that's just sort of one of those transition things they did to avoid loading screens, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
But I just felt like that the ability to do so was unlocked way too late.
I didn't really do any of the side stuff, so I didn't feel like I ever needed to fast travel.
That makes sense. Me, on the other hand, I was constantly doing side quests, and sometimes it would ask you to go back to places you'd already been to, and it was just why even have fast travel? Almost.
It almost seemed like they wanted you to fill out the entire map, and then they're going to give you fast travel.
Or
see
maybe
everything.
See everything first.
Maybe even intended for a post-game thing.
Yeah, you can't fast travel unless you've seen it. We've all played Bethesda games.
And we also figured out last time we played that if you're within one of the other realms, you can only fast travel to places within that realm. So that was a kind of a downer too.
Poor Scott didn't get his fast travel.
Another cool aspect of the game, so outside of the very basic Kratos walking everywhere, you can travel by canoe, and that was specifically around where Yggdrasil is, and the World Serpent. You're able to travel. Yeah, Lake of Nine. You're able to basically you travel by canoe to kind of traverse through that particular area, which I thought was really cool. I enjoyed that. Especially the banter you get with between Kratos, Atreus, and what's the
Mimir.
head? Yeah, Mimir. That probably one of my most favorite part of the games, and vocally was probably those canoe trips.
Yeah, I loved the banter, especially after you get Mimir.
There's this arc before you get Mimir where every time you get on the canoe, Atreus or Kratos tells Atreus a story kind of, and he's so hilariously bad at it. And then after you get Mimir, that's when they start talking about all the lore of Norse mythology and how shitty Odin and Thor and all that are.
Yeah, Mimir's your storyteller of the game.
There's not much gameplay to the actual canoe travel. You sort of just like hold the direction you want to go, and Kratos rows there. But it feels really smooth and like almost pleasing to ride in the canoe for some reason. When you're in the main lake, you can like run into barrels to get money, hack silver, I think it's called.
Yep.
And you can like sort of excavate gold or whatever from Atreus will be like, look, there's something underwater or something like that. But otherwise, there's not much to it. It's just visually interesting. And it did get to the point to where I actually was disappointed when I went in the canoe and they didn't have any like new dialogue.
I always thought it was kind of funny that Kratos is just always doing everything physical, and Atreus is just sitting there like doing nothing. Like
he's holding Mimir.
Every other dad on Earth would be like, "You row too, lazy kid. I'm not doing all the work." But Kratos is like, "Oh, I'll just do it all. I'm used to doing everything anyway."
He only had the one oar.
Maybe if Kratos didn't row, like Atreus wouldn't even be able to move the boat. I mean, I imagine Kratos weighs like 300 pounds at least, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, Atreus is a little god dude. So
yeah,
that's
for
true. By the way, did we ever figure out what his actual power was? I'm blanking for some reason, like his god power.
Well, we know that when he was arrogant, Atreus, that if he got pissed off, he could kind of in a way influence the weather.
And Mimir suggested at one point that his power might be like the languages, just like having a natural being able to like understand all languages very easily.
In Norse mythology, isn't Loki like he's the mischievous guy? Like he's able to like convince people of things and stuff like that. So
which makes me wonder where that's going, considering like there wasn't really any indication of Atreus being like mischievous or a trickster or anything.
I think it's going to just I think it's kind of going to play out that like feeding into how Norse mythology happens, except somewhere along the lines they're all just going to die. Like every Nordic god is just going to die, and they're going to move on to some other place. I feel like God of War is just all about slaying the gods and leaving us mortal people without any higher power. And then it's the world we live in today. And then maybe we'll see modern day Kratos hanging out. That'd be pretty funny.
As a snake.
Snake.
So there's not like we said, there's not much platforming. You can like sort of run at ledges and jump across them as long as you're holding the circle button. It's kind of automatic. There's climbing, which Atreus just sort of like jumps on your back and Kratos climbs up.
I want to see like a 2 scale, like Kratos to scale with a normal human being, because Atreus is really small compared to him. And I'm just like, well, how old is Atreus in this? Like 10? He's maybe 10 years old in this.
I think they said he was 12, didn't they?
12? 12-year-olds are pretty big. I mean, if a 12-year-old hung on my back, they'd be like almost able to touch the ground.
Yeah.
So how big is Kratos compared to a natural human?
I bet he's around. Let's see because Atreus could backpack on him and like still not reach his waist. So he's got to be what, 8-9 feet tall?
Scotty, are you Googling it? How tall is Kratos? He's freaking massive.
There's lots of pop-ups on these wikis.
Not to mention the width.
So I googled it. I googled it, and he's 6'6".
Wow, Atreus is just short then. I mean,
according to
nothing to sneeze at.
That's 6 inches taller than me and Scott, I think.
I'm just under 6 foot, so yeah.
How tall is Atreus?
I tried to find his
It doesn't
age.
say so.
Apparently, he doesn't have an official age. Oh well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you're climbing, you have to like sort of like look around when you reach like an end of the ledge and figure out where you're supposed to jump. It's pretty automatic. There's nothing like too hard to it. But as far as like exploration and how you get from place to place, that's about it. One of the major side quests is that you can find these dragons around near the Lake of Nine in like a few different areas. There's 3 of them. Apparently they were like dwarves that were transformed into dragons or something like that. But in those little areas,
that's an awesome transformation, by the way.
Yeah, for real.
I was a dwarf. Now I'm a dragon. Unless you lose like your like consciousness and problem solving skills. But I mean, if you're just a dwarf and then you get transformed into like a sentient dragon, I feel like that's a pretty fair trade.
Right? Except for they all got chained for who knows how many years.
Oh yeah, I guess that's a slavery.
So when you get to those areas, you sort of have to just like go around the area and find like 3 specific like headstones or like switches or whatever they were, and sort of release them, and that lets you like free the dragon. And these parts were cool because it was like very visually interesting, and yet they were like totally optional. Did you do any of those, Jay?
I did not. Did you have to fight them or did you just free them?
While they're chained up, they will like randomly shoot like blasts that sort of rain down from the sky, and in certain parts they'll breathe fire and shit. But they're not really attacking you. They seem angry, and you just need to like not be where they're like shooting their blasts or whatever. And it hurts the enemies too.
So does Kratos just free them?
Yeah, they once you get there, you can or flip all the switches. You can go up to like their main chain and sort of break it, and then they just fly off. And
okay, so I'm gonna make a prediction that we're gonna see the dragons again, and they're gonna help Kratos. I think
that'd be interesting.
Because I mean, think about it. Well, I mean, it'd make more sense if that was a main like part of the main story, so not something optional. But yeah, I mean, in the original God of War games, Kratos goes and like frees all the Titans, and then the Titans is like, like, hey, we'll help you go battle the gods.
That's cool.
It would be cool if they showed up again.
Actually, we found the first 2 dragons pretty early in the game, and it was pretty late when we found the third one. And it was kind of funny because we were like just doing side quests, and I told Corey, I was like, I wonder where the hell that third dragon is. And we turned a corner, and like there it was. But yeah, it was a little cool, like little side quest part of the game. One of the main side quests that I enjoyed. And of course, as you know, it's Atreus like pushing Kratos to do it. Come on, Dad.
Another group of really hard side quests are the Valkyrie fights. I only did one of them, and it was very, very difficult. I didn't die, but I was difficult enough for me to be like, okay, I'm done with the game.
Nice. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I think there's like at least 12. I think there might be more than that though.
What was the premise behind them again?
I'd never actually beat one because, like I said, I suck. After the first time I tried to fight one, I was like, okay, I need to come back way later. And I'm not sure I ever tried again, but just the idea of trying that, I don't think I would be able to. But anyway, I think it was that like they had been sealed away by Odin or something. Of course, some shit Odin did. But it's basically the optional bosses of the game. They're supposed to be harder than like any of the things you face during the main story.
Well, the one we tried was extremely hard.
I don't. The one that I tried, I don't feel like was that difficult. So I wonder if they have varying difficulties. But I know that it was very stressful. And that's probably when I realized that I was like, I don't really want to do this.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this, but I think I read that they all have like different fighting styles and different strategies that you have to employ against them. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we sort of touched on this already, but there are puzzles in this game, and they come up surprisingly often for God of War, I would say, probably. But
the original God of War games were pretty much all puzzles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Never mind. But most of them, like Jay said earlier, sort of involve just throwing your axe in certain spots. Like you can turn cranks and then freeze the crank in place. So whatever you cranked up stays in that spot. There's like turn wheels you can throw your axe at to spin them and cause various machinations to happen.
Machina.
Do any puzzles in particular stand out in you guys' mind?
No, I know there was one that I feel like I was slightly confused on inside of the mountain, inside of like the mine, but I don't remember exactly what it was.
I remember being sort of confused at that part too. Are you talking about when you have to like sort of raise the giant lift platform up and then out so you can ride to the top?
I hated whenever you got on a lift platform and had to fight something. Like I don't like those transitions where it's like, okay, the minute I'm going to start, like the minute this platform is going to start being raised, I'm going to have to fight stuff because they're going to like show up. They're going to
Yeah.
stop me from like, you know, hoisting the platform up with this rope. And then I'm going to have to kill them and then keep hoisting. So it was a little too formulaic for me, but
It's sort of like how whenever you go into like a big, like wide open room, you're like, I smell a boss fight. It's like whenever you get on a big elevator platform, you're
Yeah.
like, there's going to be a fight here.
yeah.
The one that stands out to me in my mind, there's like one like temple you go into, and above you there's like a series of rings that are like there's a big ring and then there's a smaller ring inside that, and all the rings sort of move independently, and you sort of have to like wait for the right spot on each ring to come around and get the right vantage point to where you can actually hit it with your axe. Do you remember which one I'm talking about, Corey?
Yeah, I know exactly which one you mean.
That one took us a while. I can't remember exactly why, but
I think we ended up having to look that one up, and turns out it was actually not that bad. We were overthinking it.
yeah. But I think that's let's see, what else is there about exploration here? There's rune chests. So those chests that have like 3 Nordic runes on them, and then they sort of vary like how they work, but for
I
the most
hated
part,
those.
there's sort of like little hidden runes near the chest that you kind of like look around for and then smash with your axe. A lot of them I did find by myself, but there came a certain point in the game where me and Corey were like, we don't want to waste a ton of time looking around, so we looked them up.
Don't you have to you have to hit them in a certain order too, right?
A lot of them, yeah.
I hate that. I just skipped them. I was like,
Some of them are timed.
Yeah. Pass.
There's the Odin Ravens, which are basically just like a collectible. There's like a spiritual raven, and they're scattered all across the world. There's like 53 of them, I think, and they're supposed to be like Odin's spies. But if you can like hit them with your axe, that destroys them, and you just. What do you get for those? Do you remember, Corey?
I don't think we actually got anything, because you would find one, throw your axe and hit it, and it would just up your count.
Trophy if you get them all.
Yeah, probably just a trophy.
There's gas poles, which they'll put out like just a field of gas around something you want to get to, usually a chest. You just have to throw your axe at it, and it freezes it, and the gas stops. But a lot of times there's like 1 or 2 or more like kind of bunched together, so you have to like, it turns into a puzzle where you have to figure out which one to freeze to get where. There was one time where I got killed by one of those, and I think Mimir was like, well, a right fine mess this is, and I'm like, already dead.
He always had some sort of like smart ass quip if you died. He'd be like, well, this is just perfect then.
The rune chests, they usually, a lot of them have like these apples, or I think it's ayun, I don't know how to say it, and horns of blood mead. Those basically increase your health and magic, so it's like a heart piece in Zelda. I don't think we ever found very many though, for some reason.
No.
There's language translating, which you can have. You find like just these plaques or headstones, and Kratos is like, "Boy, come and read these," or whatever.
I'm uneducated.
And then you get like a journal entry from Kratos.
It's so funny.
Atreus.
I feel like the relationship between Kratos and Atreus is so exactly like if a boomer was taking care of a millennial or something, because
it is kind of like that.
It cracks me up because it's like the Kratos like struggles with like the new concepts and just has to have like Atreus handle it. Like, I don't know how do you put somebody's number in this iPhone, boy come log into my Facebook for me.
Isn't there a scene where Atreus starts to teach Kratos how to like read a certain language?
Yes.
I think it gets interrupted. Like that's when one of the times Magni and Modi show up, or like Atreus falls sick or something like that. But
I just thought that was funny. And then Kratos has like no tact at all, like not able to have any kind of like emotional relationship with his kid until like way later on. It's like, oh man, that's like capturing the essence of these last couple generations.
It's the generational divide.
We talked about this in story a bit, but it was funny because at the beginning I liked Atreus a lot and didn't really care for Kratos, but as the game went on, it kind of reversed. Like I ended up liking Kratos quite a bit and Atreus not as much as I did at the start, mostly because of his that one part where he's just a total dick. But
and Kratos just has really amazing character development in this game.
Yeah. So there is a skill tree, however, and equipment upgrades. However, I let Corey do all that for me because it was too much for me, and I didn't care to spend the time. And Corey likes that type of stuff. So, why don't
it was not that bad.
Tell us about the skill tree, Corey.
Forget how. Oh yeah, it's experience. You rack up experience points, and then once you, I'm trying to remember how each skill unlocked. There was levels. Went up to level 5, and I think it was based on when Brock or Sindri would upgrade your weapon, then a new like section of the skill tree would unlock, and you could go in there and spend your experience on Kratos or Atreus. They both had their separate skill trees, and there were 3 different types, depending on one for each weapon, and then one just for like your overall skills. So you could just pick what you wanted. And then weapon upgrades, as soon as you would go talk to like Brock or Sindri, it was just a myriad of like options. You could upgrade Atreus, you could upgrade his bow and arrow, his armor, Kratos' armor, the axe, the blades, pretty much everything. And then by doing that, you would unlock new skills and new abilities.
Stop tapping the mic.
Sorry. And then also you could upgrade like your defense, your strength, your runic, and there was like 6 others, luck, cooldown. It was a lot, but once you got the hang of it, just understanding, this armor, do you want more defense? Do you want more strength? You had an armor that would do it.
As far as like an upgrade system, how did you feel about it?
Overall, I'd say it was pretty good. There was just there was just a lot packed into it. So a lot of times you felt like you almost had to study to figure out which direction you wanted to go.
Yeah, I found it very complicated, which is why I had you do it. What about you, Jay? Was there like a certain like way you tended to develop Kratos and Atreus, or?
I don't remember, but I also don't put a lot of energy into those things.
Yeah, right.
I also don't enjoy it. Like I just want to go and fight stuff or watch a cutscene. I don't like spending time in the menu. So I usually just like scan through like what skill I'm about to blow it all on, and then just pick it. Like I don't like read in depth. I just, oh, this sounds cool. That's what I'm doing with Ghost of Tsushima right now. Like I'm not spending a lot of time like trying to build a certain like have a specific build for my character. I'm just like, oh, this sounds cool. Sure, why not?
What's wrong with you guys? That's where you get your cool stuff.
Well, again, like
is the story, okay? That's the cool stuff.
A lot of times you would unlock this really cool ability, and the button combo would be so complicated that I just would never use it.
Or you would forget which one you had on.
Yeah. I think that's about it as far as like all the different gameplay elements. But do we want to talk about like some of the enemies that you can encounter? There's not actually that many.
Yeah, I feel like there's actually less total different kinds of enemies than most God of War games. I feel like the God of War was kind of known for like just having a ton of different kinds of enemies that you in this game. It was like this as well, but you like the harder or the farther you get towards like the end goal of the game, the more difficult enemies you start to face, or more difficult types of enemies. I don't feel like there wasn't really anything too impressive out of the enemies, if I recall correctly. I feel like they were kind of like meh, besides the trolls and the dragons.
The Reavers were dicks.
Oh, those are those like the swamp witch things.
Yeah, that had the staff.
You have to like shoot them with Atreus's arrows before they're vulnerable. and they can like summon other enemies. I hated those bitches. The cannon fodder enemy is the Draugr, which are basically just like skeleton warriors.
They're the grunts.
Yeah.
Don't you have to? So you have to use specific weapons on specific enemies, if I recall correctly. There are certain enemies that the Leviathan axe doesn't work on, and there are certain enemies that the Blades of Chaos don't work on.
Right, and which can be interesting if you stumble into a side area that you're not necessarily prepared for and don't have the Blades of Chaos yet.
Yeah, you're just attacking them like, why is this not working?
Right, it sucks.
I'm trying to remember what were the Hell Walkers again? I don't
really... they were obviously in hell. I will make a bet on that. They were those are the ones that they're the undead warriors from Helheim. Those are the ones that you can't use the ice axe on.
Oh, right.
They're the reason why you have to go and get the Blades of Chaos, I'm pretty sure.
That's right. I'm not sure if this is an enemy or a boss, but there's lots of trolls in the game, and you basically fight them all the same way. Yeah, it's almost like a mini boss kind of, but by the time you finish the game, they don't really even feel like a boss necessarily. But the basic strategy to them is just, deal a certain amount of damage. You can distract them with the arrows and then climb up on their backs. And then you could sort of, if they're not dead, like sort of wail on them and take out other smaller enemies with them.
Just punch them in the top of the head while they stumble around.
And then when you're
go ahead,
when you're done, Kratos just like throws them down and so slashes his axe into the side of their jaw.
I remember those cutscenes. So Gracie really likes, whenever I play games, she usually just lays down and watches me play games. And I played God of War in front of her and like all these other, games that most people would be like, oh, not for a child.
Right.
But usually she watches those and is like, oh, wow. Like she watches me with Ghost of Tsushima too. And she's just like, oh, are you going to jump down and stab that one too? I'm just like, is this healthy?
I'm going to report you, Jay.
Okay. One thing that I don't think we spent a lot of time on is, and I remember this because what you just talked about with the trolls, there are a lot of interactive cutscenes like the old God of War games. So usually you have like finishing moves that you can perform on a bunch of different types of enemies. And it's basically just an interactive cutscene where you deal like the final blow. It's especially common in like pseudo boss and boss battles. And I think for boss battles, it's actually required.
Yeah. A lot of times that's like Kratos' finishing move.
Yeah. And it's just like awesome. They're usually fantastic, especially Baldur. Like the interactive cutscenes with Baldur or like with any of the God v God battles, those interactive cutscenes are just phenomenal. Like my favorite part of the game.
Yeah, I agree. However, one complaint I did see is that apparently there's not as many bosses in this game.
That's true.
You do get so you don't get to see too many like amazing finishers. And by the eighth time you've seen the troll finisher, it's like, okay.
I feel like the interactive cutscenes with these bosses also isn't nearly as brutal as previous God of War games used to be. Like I feel
you
like
think that's
Kratos,
part of like the maturation of the series?
Yeah, like I specifically remember there being cutscenes in the old God of War games where you're like, you're fighting Zeus and you have an interactive cutscene where you just take the Blades of Chaos and stab it in his gut like several times, and you're just sitting and like blood's pouring everywhere. Like I don't remember seeing anything like as brutal. Like Kratos was like significantly more brutal with the like the Greek gods than he has been with the Norse gods.
Atreus and Faye softened him up.
Yeah,
I guess so.
Like he was cutting their heads off, like gutting them. He stabbed a sword through Athena. Like it was pretty hardcore.
Another enemy is the nightmares. Those are those like floating eyeball things with some tentacles. That they usually just like cast like some statusy spells on you, I think. they were very annoying, but not hard to kill. And once you get the Blades of Chaos, you can like sort of hit them with the chain and pull them to you, and then he sort of like throws them into the enemies. So I thought that was really cool, even though hitting them with the chain, it was actually probably a little harder than the axe. There's different types of those. There was the Ancients and the Soul Eaters, which are like the giant like rock golems. You have to like sort of hit their core when they open up, and
Oh,
knock
yeah,
off
yeah.
like these little bombs that you have to throw back into them. Those were I found those challenging, but not too challenging. So I actually kind of liked fighting those for the most part. There's tattle worms, which are like these weird worm beasts that kind of burrow in the ground, and you could throw your axe at the ground to knock them out. So those are you don't run into them too often, I don't think. And then there's the travelers, which I think were mostly optional, and basically they were just like super warriors with like heavy armor.
Oh yeah, I do remember those guys.
A lot of times they guarded the torch towers around the Lake of Nine.
Yeah.
I only remember having to like face one or a handful of them in the main story.
I think that was the purple enemy that was your first death.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So I think that about covers the enemies, but do we want to talk about some of the boss fights?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the first boss fight, like we said, there's not that many, but the first one is like pretty much at the beginning of the game. You fight at the time known as the Stranger, who of course later turns out to be Baldur. And Jay, I think you mentioned last week that you really liked this first boss.
Oh yeah, it probably my favorite part of the game, because it especially for newcomers, like newcomers into this game, or just people who haven't, because I haven't played a God of War game since probably when God of War 3 came out. I think I got God of War 3 on release, which that's been a hot second. But yeah, I have not. Yeah, it was 2010 that it was released. So that's 9 years, 8 years since I last saw Kratos in a capacity like that.
It's almost the same amount of time since Kratos has been seen,
right? Yeah.
Or the time lapse.
So like, I feel like it's been longer than 9 years. My God, I feel like Kratos looked like he aged 20 years. But anyway, so you kind of go into the game and you see him pick up the tree, and you're like, yeah, okay, he's rippling with muscle. Like, he's a god. Like, we still, especially newcomers, like you've heard about Kratos. He's like the crazy pseudo god guy who's super violent. But then you actually see what he can do in that boss battle. Like, he's picking up huge stones. He's like getting beat to death and healing. So you kind of get a glimpse into like, oh my gosh, like this guy is basically invincible. Like he's also incredibly tough because he can still feel all that pain, and so he can handle it. And, he's super strong. It's like all these otherworldly aspects of Kratos that you just see right up in your face, and some really beautiful cutscenes. And I just thought
like a literal giant stone pillar on him.
Yeah, it was like a really fantastic reintroduction to the series and to Kratos and his superpowers.
Isn't there a part of that boss fight where like you sort of go over a cliff and it's like there's a river and the ravine below, and Kratos like sort of uses the axe to stop himself from falling and pulls himself back up?
I think so.
Am I making that up?
That I'm not sure about.
That seems like something Kratos would do.
Yeah. The Baldur fights were all really fun just because of the combat aspect. It felt like kind of not too hard, but it's sort of like Kratos had met his match, more or less. The next boss, if I'm remembering things in order correctly, other than the trolls and ogres and all that, is the dragon in the mountain, which I don't remember its name. I remember having to ask Disa how to pronounce it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Some crazy letters and all that. But it starts when you're going up the mountain on that lift platform that we were talking about earlier, and then the dragon sort of comes out of a cave and attacks the platform and slowly destroys it. And then you end up getting like a one-on-one fight with it where it's shooting its electric breath out at you, and you sort of got to like time when to approach it because it swipes its claws. So right after you swipe, you got to run up and do that. And then you also have to like throw those weird like vine red plant bombs. I don't remember what they're actually supposed to be, but that was a really cool boss. Like I really enjoyed that part. And then it ends with Kratos. I think he like somehow rams like a giant spear through his jaw or something like that. And then I remember he actually is inside his mouth at one point, like holding his snout open. I believe he like cuts its tongue in two and then like pierces the roof of its like mouth with his axe and sort of runs along with it.
He does intense stuff, man. Like
He really does.
like I don't know, every single interactive cutscene is usually something like, oh damn, like Kratos, you're imaginative.
That part is what reminded me the most of like the brutal deaths that you would get with the giant monsters in the original games, because I sort of remember how that Hydra fight at the beginning of the first one was.
That I feel so I don't remember how he actually kills Magni and Modi.
The only
you
thing
guys remember?
I don't really remember those boss fights that well.
They weren't that great, to be completely honest.
The Magni Modi one, the only thing I can remember from it really is that if you missed something, then it would like you would be circled by this cloud of fog, and like you would pull Atreus in like right behind you, and you'd have to like just look around and wait for them to come from a direction, and you'd have to like quick time hit them, or else they would hit you, and they would get like 4 or 5 turns like that, and then the fog would lift, and then you'd go again.
Yep. I really don't even remember those that well. I don't even remember how Magni dies. I remember Modi because it was a cutscene. That was when Atreus killed him against Kratos' will. There's a second fight with just Modi too, right?
Yeah, the second fight with Modi, isn't that when Atreus kills him?
I think they find him again later, like weak and beaten. And they're like constantly insulting Faye the whole time, which is why Atreus loses it.
Oh, yeah.
But then the second fight with Baldur is at the peak of the mountain. When you go back there, I think they've opened the gate to the giant land, Jotunheim. And it sort of plays out the same as the first, but then you end up on the back of Baldur's dragon, and it's sort of flying above the Lake of Nine. This is where you sort of get the part where you learn some stuff for the final boss fight later, but Kratos is on his back and you have to like roll to avoid like Baldur stomps back and forth. I thought that part was kind of lame just because it seems weird that Kratos would just stay on his back and roll side to side.
Well, he's got to be strategic,
I guess. But it was visually cool because, like I said, you're on the back of a dragon the whole time. And there's even one part of that where he like falls off the dragon and Atreus saves him or something like that, if I remember right.
I don't see how would Atreus save Kratos from falling off a dragon.
You're probably right, but
he's like
I remember you almost fall.
He's like a 50-pound boy.
Yeah. And then of course
let Kratos fall. He'll be fine. Just let him crash.
Loosh. I remember you could also like see the world serpent like below, like kind of watching the battle during that part. And then their final boss fight, Baldur, which we spoke about last week, but this is like a really cool fight. You sort of have to like use everything you've learned so far in the combat. It's like 3 or 4 different phases. You've got Freya on the giant reanimated giant the whole time yelling at you to stop. I think she contributes to the battle a little bit, but not that much. And then you got the element switching towards the end, which I really enjoyed because there wasn't another enemy in the game that really required that. What did you guys think about the final boss?
I thought it was not super climactic.
It's weird because like I think I said this last week. I didn't know that it was the final boss because I knew there was another chapter after that, which turned out to be just the ending. But
yeah. I felt like it was like, okay, now what? Like I get it. Like this is supposed to be Like there's more games coming after it. But every single other God of War game has like this pinnacle at like God of War 1, you fight and kill Ares. God of War 2, you fight Zeus, almost kill him, and then Athena stops you. God of War 3, you kill Zeus, and then Kratos kills himself, quote unquote. Kills himself. And then like, okay, Balder dies in a semi-anticlimactic way. We don't really care about Balder. Freya's all pissed. And then we find out some more plot, and then the game's over.
Yeah. I'm just remembered one part of the fight where they're like falling from the sky for some reason and sort of like grappling in that air, and Atreus is just like letting arrows fly into them as they fall. That part was really cool. But yeah, so I've seen better bosses. I do wish that there were more to go around, but yeah. So I put in the doc here to describe how the game was as a newcomer to the series for myself. I think I really did enjoy the game, but not as much as I was hoping to necessarily, just because I think maybe it was a little overhyped, but also I think maybe this style of game.
You watch what you're saying, Scott. It was hyped the exact amount it needed to be hyped.
We'll get there. I think just this very like gritty, mythology based thing with, there is a story, but I didn't feel like there was very much of it. It's just maybe not my thing, not my aesthetic. But I did like, I don't think I would like the older God of War games at all, just because of like how high octane, macho masculinity, testosterone it is.
That's the point. That's the point of Kratos, and he has the development where he like is losing that toxic masculinity that he's been about the entire series. Because you got to remember, he is a Spartan. Like he was born and raised a Spartan in Greece. Is that sounds right? Spartan, Greece, Greek gods, whatever. So like he was born and raised in this idea of like battle, death, be a man, and now he has
a man.
Well, yeah. So,
but I do think that the change that they've done in the series has made it more appealing to people like me. So I mean, I'm definitely going to be on board for the sequel whenever that comes along. So, despite it not being necessarily my favorite game I've played recently. But what about you, Corey? This was also your God of War virginity cherry popping.
Jesus.
Were you happy that it was Kratos that did it?
Yes. Looking back, yes. It's a beautiful game to watch. I talked about it last week, so I won't go too much into it. But it's a very slow start after that entry Balder fight, because that kind of just hypes you up and puts you on edge, and then I feel like it just drops you off a cliff, because then it's a long drought of doing more boring stuff. But once you get to a certain point, it kind of shifts into overdrive and sucks you in, and then you want more story, you want more dialogue. The characters are likable enough because there's not many characters, so it was easier, I guess, for them to build up each character more, if that makes sense. But no, overall, I thought it was a fun game to watch.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about the gameplay we should talk about?
You're not gonna ask me to describe how it was, coming from like a big fan of
a God of War veteran.
We don't care about your opinion.
So you only care. Yeah. Okay. I see the favoritism here, because I don't live in your house. You don't want to ask.
Hey, the door's open. No. Please, Jay, tell us your thoughts as a veteran.
So I'm going to dive a little bit into the story of Kratos via God of War 1, 2, and 3, and why I really, really enjoyed this new God of War. So in the first God of War, we know Kratos is all like hell-bent on just getting revenge on the god of Ares. and he gets it, and then he takes his place. And then, at some point, the gods betray him, and he wants to get his revenge on those gods. And so he tries, and doesn't succeed. And then the third one, he goes, frees all the Titans, eventually kills all the Greek gods, and succeeds. And then, but one major aspect that a lot of people forget is that in the first game, Kratos opens Pandora's box and actually absorbs all the power within Pandora's box. So Pandora's box, for people who don't know, is the idea of all of the emotions of mankind exist in Pandora's box. So when you open Pandora's box, you are opening like a plague of all these different emotions, and Kratos actually absorbs that, which basically fuels his rage, his frustration, his want for revenge, because he wanted the power in Pandora's box to be able to slay the gods. But it basically turned him into like this evil, vindictive, slaughter machine. Then at the very, very end of God of War 3, whenever he gets his revenge, the spirit of Athena wants that power back, the Pandora's box. But there's a big talk, and I think this is correct. There's a big talk about how Kratos actually used up all of the rage and all of the anger that came out of Pandora's box, and all that was left was hope. And so Athena wanted to take that hope for herself. And Kratos is basically like, no, screw you. And that's whenever he stabs himself. And the whole point was that he released hope to mankind. And then that's how God of War 3 ends. And so there's like a cutscene at the very, very end of God of War 3 where you just see a blood trail from where Kratos stabbed himself with the sword of Olympia. And that's kind of where it ended. Flash forward to God of War 2018, and we know Kratos is now like in a completely different area. He settled down, wife, kid, and is obviously not like this homicidal maniac. And I thought that was it's really interesting to go back and look and see how absolutely nutso Kratos was in the first 3 God of War games. And then remembering the whole storyline around Pandora's box actually being the cause of that. And then in this new game, you actually see Kratos for Kratos, like how Kratos actually is, not Kratos, the Kratos who's like filled with Pandora's box. So I don't know, it was a very cool take. I feel like you actually see Kratos as a character with like emotional backing and character development, now that the whole idea of him just being like a murderous monster is like not happening anymore. So as a fan of the series, I thought it was absolutely phenomenal to actually see Kratos as like a character with development as opposed to just a slaughter machine. And especially the way you see him progress from like this old, like unemotional, Spartan way of thinking into like, oh yeah, I'm a dad, I need to, like, I can help this kid. I kind of like seen the error of my ways. And then the fact that he is like haunted by the things that he did, whereas throughout all of the God of War series, he had like zero regrets. Like Athena at the very, very end basically tells Kratos that he's going to regret everything that he did. And Kratos' last line is just like, you know nothing about me. And so I don't know, I just thought it was really cool to see that like foreshadowing there, like whenever he no longer has all that power from Pandora's box, how heavily everything that he did sits on him. I don't know. And so having been a fan of the series to what it is now, I was just I just felt it was really profound, to be completely honest, like how they kind of tied it all together.
It's a sad dad story.
Yeah,
or a mad dad story. Both.
Yeah, mad dad story.
Sad mad dad.
Sad mad dad. Sad mad dad bad. But yeah, so as I said, I really, really love it.
Did you enjoy the evolution of the gameplay?
Yeah, I thought I'm very glad that they changed the gameplay. I probably would not have liked it as much if they kept it as like the old school hack and slash.
Nice. Well, I think that monologue there is a good way to wrap up our gameplay section. So you guys ready to move on to the ratings?
So ready.
Let's do it.
Okay. So our first category here is story. So I guess I will go first. Um, This is an interesting one because I did enjoy the second half, but the first half was very slow, as we talked about. But I'll give it a 7. I thought about 6, but I think that's might be a little bit too harsh. So what about you, Jay?
Man, come on, Scott. So this is entirely influenced by my understanding of like the previous God of War games. So I'm not a newcomer. If I were a newcomer, I might be giving it a different story, but or different rating. But I am going to give it a 9. And the only reason I'm not giving it a 10 is because I felt like towards the end of the game, like there could have been more story building. I feel like they focused a little too heavily on Baldur and Freya, and maybe it'll make sense in future games why they did that. But the Baldur and Freya were not captivating enough for me to be like, yes, this game is a story is a perfect 10 out of 10.
You don't really run into Baldur enough to super care about him.
Yeah, and every time you do, it's just like some boss fight where you're like, oh, this mofo's invincible. Like, why are you still fighting him, Kratos?
I did really enjoy Freya, but I think that's probably the strength of this game, though, other than Baldur, is its characters. There's not that many of them, so they're all like very memorable and likable.
Except for what is it, Magni? What is it? The two
Magni
sons
and
of
Modi.
Thor. Yeah.
Yeah, I can barely even remember what Magni looks like. I sort of remember Modi more because he was in it longer. But
and I really wish there would have been some scene to at least see Thor and Odin. Like, I feel like that would have been like a good enough tease to be like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for more.
by
But
the
we
way,
do get a small glimpse of Thor.
yeah, I was about to say you see him in the secret ending, which we actually threw the game back into the PS4 yesterday.
I don't think I saw a secret ending. Oh no,
We didn't either. And then somebody in the Discord told me that all you have to do is go back to the house after you beat the game. So,
God dang, I'm going to YouTube right after this.
so you do.
But yeah,
see,
you get a glimpse of Thor.
Yeah, he's thick.
He thick Thor.
So Corey, we're not going to count Corey's scores towards our official rating, but we are going to get his ratings anyway. How did you feel about the
sucks
story?
to be singled out, doesn't it, Corey?
Yeah, it does. Assholes.
Well, because he didn't actually play other than the skill doing the skill tree.
Oh, don't give your excuses now. I'm splitting the difference and giving it an 8. I'm docking points because the beginning is a story drought, but it gains back a point when you get to that second half. Like you guys said, you don't really run into enough of the characters often enough to care about them. Like, your enemy's supposed to be Baldur, but you see him 3 times. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad story at all. It really sucked me in, and I really like the setup that they've ended us on.
Oh yeah, that's another thing that I really loved is that like the revelation that that Atreus was supposed to be named Loki, and like everybody's like, "Oh my god!" Psh! Like mind blown. Like,
Unless it was spoiled for you.
Everybody knows who Loki is. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, everybody knows who Loki is. Everybody knows that it's like in Norse mythology, Loki is Odin's adopted son. Like that's the mythology. And so it's like, okay, well, what the hell happens to Kratos if they respect mythology? Like what?
Do you think it's going to be one more game or 2 more games for the Norse arc?
I think they're going to stick with 2 more games. I think they're going to do 3. They're going to do sets of 3.
That makes sense. All right, so our next category is combat. I'm going to give it an 8. I wanted to give it a 7 just because I was bad at it and didn't really enjoy it. But if I look at it objectively, I can see that there's a really like fleshed out, amazing, multifaceted combat system here. It's just it wasn't for me necessarily. So it got an extra point from me. So I don't want to hear any comments about harshness. What about you?
I'm gonna give it a 10. I feel like every game could have similar combat, and I would be totally fine with that.
I think
Wow.
I always think back to Spider-Man, which I guess sort of has a similar combat system. It's just you're a lot faster. But I didn't have any problems with learning all the moves and all that in that game. So
I'm gonna go 8 as well. I feel like they layer in so many parts to it and don't really try to like incentivize you to memorize and master all of them. So I can see where it can be seen as overly complicated, but also I can see where people would say it's kind of a boring hack and slash. But overall, like smoothness of it and how it looks during gameplay is impeccable.
okay. So non-combat. So I guess that would just be like exploration and the side quests and the puzzles and all that. Um, I actually feel more positive about this than the actual combat. Sailing around in the canoe is fun, despite there not really being much to it. Sort of exploring the world is really interesting, although I do feel like you end up in a lot of like boring looking caves throughout the game. And there's a surprising amount of puzzles for me anyway. I was surprised at how many there were, and the puzzles are usually actually fun without being too complicated in anything. I'm going to give this an 8 too, because there's not, even though I really liked it, there's just like not that much to it. So what about you, Jay?
I'm gonna give it a 7, just because I don't like stupid little puzzles. Like I hated trying to do the rune thing. I just did not enjoy it. Um,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Corey?
I'll go 7 as well. Just because it did seem like sometimes the puzzles were just there for puzzle's sake. I felt like I didn't like the map kind of layout. It was a weird way to get around places. I never really fully grasped it. But the dialogue sells me on like the canoe travel and whatnot.
Yeah. Something I'm more positive about you guys than you guys. I wasn't expecting that at all on this rating thing. Which brings us to like graphics and art design. For me, I don't really see how you could dock it at all. It's beautiful. Everything is like very themed to like the Norse mythology. I didn't really see any graphical issues at all or any graphical glitches either. It's a 10.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 10 too for that exact reason.
Same 10. It's a piece of art.
Yeah, that is one thing I can say is even just like the general like design of everything is awesome. So music. This one's tough because I actually listened to the whole soundtrack trying to pick out music for this game. There's a few good pieces, but for the most part it's really cinematic, orchestral, choir. It's not really something you would want to listen to outside of the game, although it does accompany the game very well while you're playing it. So I'll give it a 7. It's not. I don't think it's so bad that there's nothing bad about it. Like I said, it's just not memorable.
I'm also gonna give it a 7, and mainly because, like you said, I don't remember it at all. Which, in my opinion, that means that it fit in the atmosphere of the game very well, which I think is important. But at the same time, like I feel like I would rather have been listening to um, like metal music about Norse mythology during this. So yeah,
I'm
7.
sure that's out there.
It is Amon Amarth. They sing all about Odin and Thor. It's really awesome.
Yeah, if I was rating it just based on the music alone, I would probably give it like a 5 or maybe even lower. But it accompanies the game very well. And what about you, Corey?
I was going to give it a 6, but you all have talked me into a 7 because you make a good point. The game where the sections where music is playing has you so focused on what's happening in front of you that you're not worried about what's happening in the background. So yeah, the music, it's not memorable, but I don't think it's supposed to be. So it's kind of like rated on how they executed it. Because the only like track I can really remember is that very ending track.
Yeah. And then we've got our last official category, the overall feel, which is just like in general how we feel about the game. So for me, I did like the game quite a lot. However, I wouldn't put it in like even my top Sony exclusives necessarily. I'd much rather play like Last of Us or Horizon or Spider-Man any day. But like I said, I did like the game. It's just not one of my favorite things I've played. I think I'll give it. I'm struggling between a 7 and an 8. I think I'll do an 8 just because I can recognize that this is a great game. It's just not necessarily tailor made for me.
So I'm going to give it overall feel, how I feel about this. So I feel the game is fantastic and I would recommend it to anybody and everybody. And I would put it ahead of The Last of Us and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Damn.
So I will probably give it a 10.
All right.
Oh.
You were very positive about it. You were like, I remember when I first told you I was playing it, you were like, yes.
Me, on the other hand, I would not put this above Horizon Zero Dawn any day.
Corey loves Horizon.
It's okay to be wrong.
Horizon Zero Dawn to me is just a masterclass of a game. But this is a game I could see myself going back and playing it for myself, and still enjoying another playthrough and still enjoying the dialogue. And we've already said it's an absolutely stunningly beautiful game. So I'll lean towards. I'll give it an 8 as well, just because it definitely is not one of my all-time favorites, but I could definitely see myself playing it again.
You know what I want to see? This is what I want to see from you guys. I would
boy.
love to see you guys go back and play the first 3 games and then play this game again. It's a terrible amount of Kratos, so you'd probably be sick of it towards the end unless you spaced it out really well. But I think I am entirely influenced by my past experience with the game series. I feel like most people who really, really love this game are also previous fans of the series, just because it is like new gamer safe. So like new to the series safe, but it's certainly not like if you know nothing of God of War, you're going to struggle a little bit. So I would love.
Do you really think that we would like them though?
No, like actually playing the game, I think you guys probably wouldn't like it that much. But I just think getting a better understanding of Kratos as a character and his development might influence you a little bit. But
I could definitely see that,
because I think like it is very hack and slashy and like puzzles. But if you put it on like the easiest mode, you can kind of sail through it, and there still are like a really ton of cool scenes in the old God of War games.
It might be worth it to like watch one of those like YouTube movies where it just like stitches all the cutscenes together in a really
yeah, you can
nice
probably
way.
do that as long as you're also getting like the interactive murder scenes.
Right. Okay. And then we got our bonus category, which does not count towards our final score. It's the final boss category. So how we felt about the final boss, the challenge of it, and just how it went in general. Like Jay said, it is a bit anticlimactic, and I think just the structure of the ending sort of takes away from it. But the actual fight itself is amazing and very cinematic. Some cool like cutscenes interspersed into it. Freya sort of got on my nerves a little bit towards the end of it because she's just like screaming over and over, begging you not to hurt Baldur with her animated giant or whatever. But the elemental switching, I really loved that. I only died once, which was nice, I think. What was it, once or was it 2 or 3, Corey?
I think it was just the one time.
Yeah. So I feel like pretty positive about that as a final boss. I'm gonna give it a 9.
So this is probably where a prior experience of the games caused me to dock it down a little bit, because I mentioned before that all of the final boss battles in the previous games always wrapped up some strand of story that was a little more focused. Like there was some story here with Baldur, like he was following Kratos around. You get a little like it's obviously building up some relationship between Kratos and Freya, and it's probably gonna cause more issues in the future with Odin and Thor. But I never felt like Baldur was the bad guy. I felt like he was the like just some guy who ended up who was just like a foot soldier.
I think maybe
And
they hyped up Odin and Thor a little too much.
yeah,
Because I kept expecting to have to fight one of them at some point.
yeah. So that at the end of the other games, there was always like some type of closure after some epic boss battle, or after the epic final battle. Like there was always some like usually there certainly were cliffhangers, but it's not like they were. It's not like you just felt like, okay, this was a mid game boss battle. Like I felt like the final battle with Baldur was like a mid game, like first act boss battle is kind of how
Yeah.
I felt. So with that being said, I'm gonna give it a 7. I don't know. I just feel like that boss battle made me feel like I was only halfway through the game.
Gotcha. Okay. And Corey?
I'm going to go 9 as well, just for the visuals of it. It's a really epic scene to watch play out, and like I mentioned earlier, I really like how they have set us up for the upcoming sequels. I really like that setup.
Okay. All right. Well, normally we would take a break here to calculate our scores, but I was actually able to do it on the fly here, thanks to Jay's monologuing. Thank you, Jay. Stall for time. So do you want to? Well, I guess I'll just read them. I gave it a 48 out of 60, which translates to an 80%. Jay gave it a 53 out of 60, which is an 88%. And Corey gave it a 48 out of 60, same score as me, 80%. So if you calculate mine and Jay's scores together, because Corey doesn't count, our final overall official after years review score is an 84%. If we had counted Corey's score, it would have been an 83. So how do you feel about that as our overall score, Jay?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. It's really hard to get like a super good score with our review skill. So that's actually a pretty good rating from us. Although I still disagree with the way they rated some of the games back in the golden years days. But so yeah,
that's why we bought the show out, man. We bought 51% of the shares.
We're just gonna slam every game. So yeah, an 84 total.
Cool. So next up, we got to do some listener feedback. So we polled our Discord group, and I think maybe you posted on Twitter. I don't know if anybody's.
Nobody responded, even though I attached a really funny GIF of Kratos throwing a computer in a dumpster. So I'm not. I thought that would get some.
I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah. So this is certainly a fun part of the review. So we asked everybody's feedback and opinions on this, and we did get some feedback. So what about it, Scott? Lead us in.
So first off, we got our new patron, Satan85. He said, I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Satan 85.
Oh, so he's backwoods, huh?
Yeah.
He said,
I didn't know how to pronounce it either.
I didn't much care for the story overall, mainly because I kind of hated Atreus and still wasn't crazy about Kratos either. I did like the witch though, and the dwarves were awesome. As far as gameplay, I mostly enjoyed the combat on hard, even though I did struggle against some encounters and thought the puzzle elements were fun enough. Also, it was nice they rewarded exploration, but I only did so much of that. Overall, it was a solid 7.5, I'd say. It kind of surprised me because I think it's I don't really understand how you could hate Atreus,
Yeah, I don't get the Atreus hate.
but maybe he just finds all kids annoying. I'm not
Well,
sure.
I mean, I can see hating the section of the game where Atreus is the arrogant asshole.
He is kind of whiny at the beginning of the game too.
But the
Daddy, I want to shoot the bow and arrow, Dad.
But once you look past that, like Atreus is all about like wanting to help people and wanting to do the right thing and wanting to grow and learn and just wanting to kind of fulfill his mom's last wish. Like I think if you look at Atreus overall, I don't know. I feel like it would be hard to hate that character.
I did actually ask him why he didn't like Atreus. He said, I just found him very annoying, mainly. The whole father-son thing just never clicked for me, I guess. I said, fair. He said, I think maybe I was expecting too much because of the hype, which likely didn't help. He only paid $20 for it, so he can't complain. Kratos is way better than he was in the others from what I've seen of them, and the little I played of 1 and 2. He does get better, but Atreus does get better, but I guess it just never really won me over as a great story, which is fine. We can't all love everything, which is fair.
Yep. So next up we have Arobi.
Ariobe?
Ariobe?
I'm not sure.
Ariobe. So if you're still taking opinions on God of War, I enjoyed it. The story was definitely a departure from previous entries where he just wants to kill everything, but still kept Kratos' overarching theme of family in it. Atreus is a bit annoying and my least favorite character, but he wasn't the worst traveling companion.
Damn, another one.
The dwarves gave some nice comic relief, and I enjoyed hearing the stories on longer boat rides with Mimir. I actually chose them over any shortcuts across the map when possible. Gameplay was great, even though I can't actually beat a damn Valkyrie for the life of me, but it's a goal someday.
Same.
It looks amazing, and the music was okay. Nothing stood out to me in a good or bad way. Overall, a 9 out of 10, and I look forward to the future of the series.
That was one thing I meant to complain about, actually, is it's really hard to find collectibles. Like, if you miss them, then even with a guide, it can be difficult to find them. I wish there was some way to track them somehow. But I basically feel the same way as him on all those aspects, except for, Atreus not liking him.
Next up, we've got our good friend Mini BT. Says, you might discuss it in gameplay, but I want to hear your love for the troll boss fights. So, real question. Do you think we will actually fight Odin in the sequel, or will that be held off until game 3?
We already talked about the troll boss fights, how they're very repetitive, and after maybe your third one, you're over them. But as for his other question, we sort of touched on that when we were speculating about whether there would be 2 or 3 games in this little arc. I think if there is a third game, they will save Odin for that one.
Agreed.
We might see him in part 2.
If it is a trilogy, 2 will be Thor, 3 will be Odin.
What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, that it's either. I think 2 will be Odin, 3 will be Thor.
Really?
Oh,
reversed.
I think Thor is going to prove a different challenge than Odin, because you have to remember the entire premise of the World Serpent being there is because way in the future, during what's the whole idea in Norse mythology around the end, Ragnarok.
Yep.
With Ragnarok, that's whenever Thor slaps the World Serpent into the past. So we know that Thor is fighting the World Serpent during Ragnarok way in the future.
This joke came to me when I was listening back to the part 1. You know how parents are always like, I will smack you into next week to their kids. That's what Thor did basically to Jormungandr.
Yep.
We got one more feedback there, Jay.
So the last feedback, which I totally missed, was Abrak, and he said, it's a long one. He said, it's very good.
Period.
Very, very concise. And I guess that's one way to sum everything up. Whew, yeah, so I guess that about wraps up our review for God of War 2018.
Ooh.
All right, so let's wrap it up, Scott. So what's happening next week?
Next week, this was Rich's idea. We're going to be talking all about weapons in all of our favorite RPGs. Which ones are our favorites? Which ones are our least favorites? What are the craziest weapons? Should be a fun one. We'll have to see like how far we can take that topic, but I think it should be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I have some ideas. I'm going to help Rich kind of expand on that a little bit.
Good man.
So also we have the RPG Club, and we are playing Wild Arms. So anybody who is participating in that, you need to get to the Sacred Shrine by August 23rd. So be sure that if you get there, you share your thoughts with us, and we'll talk about that on the show.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it. So if you want to help out the show, besides participating in the RPG Club, which we are all very enjoying very much, please go and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever podcasting platform you use if they have a review system. It helps out the show a lot. I think one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that your ratings and reviews, besides, helping people understand whether or not the podcast is good, it actually elevates the podcast in like who actually sees it when they're searching for podcasts and all that. So yeah, go give us a review. We would very much appreciate it. But an even better way you can help us out
is the Patreon. Like I said earlier, you get a lot of benefits through the Patreon with these guys. Some of them are the early episode access, so you can listen before anybody else. You don't have to listen to the anchor ads anymore, so you don't have to worry about skipping ahead. You get the extra episodes of the Aftercast, which is the kind of laid back, loungy podcast with these guys. You get the extra game reviews, which there's plenty of. And with the RPG Club, you get to not only vote, but nominate and more. So just go to patreon.com/RPG After Years and throw some money towards these guys.
Yep. Also, you can follow us on Twitch. So that's twitch.tv RPG After Years.
We're streaming right now. And if you guys want to participate live in the chat, feel free. We will bring you into the episode. So some ways to get in touch with us. We do have an email address. You can email any feedback or thoughts to if you've already left a review or questions or anything like that. That email is rpgafteryears@gmail.com. But another great way to get in touch with us,
you can join the Discord. We're all in there. It's a very active community. You can hear us debate, complain, bitch, brag about pretty much all things RPG and a lot of things non-gaming related.
Let's be honest, it's mostly bitching.
80%.
everybody
the link for that
knows your name.
Lord. If you want to join in on the fun over there, you can find the link in the show notes or go to their Twitter page, and it is in the pinned tweet.
Yep. So that's the Twitter is @RPG Years. You can find me @JAYD Hizzle.
You can find me at the Scott Spot.
And me @VFL Corey with an E.
So I think that is about it. So the God of War review is done, and I think we need to get a boy drop. You want to do that?
Boy, I thought about that.
So we did have to split it up. We were planning to do JRPG July and RPG Club in this episode, but I'm glad we didn't. So yeah, what does this last section say, Scott? I'm sorry, I screwed the pooch there.
Do not mistake our silence for a lack of grief.
Yes. So we look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Until then, I'm Jay.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Corey.
Bye.
Catch you guys later.
The
Bye.
beast has been slain. The world has been saved. Our heroes are basking in the after years. They rest in the tavern for all to hear the tale of how they banish their fear. Revel in the peace that reigns through the land. All will know it was by our heroes' hands. Here in the after years. Here in the RPG after years. Here in the RPG after years.